Springer, right?
And we're off and running on a Tuesday, and it's beginning to look a lot like Thanksgiving. I'm up here in New York today, where everywhere I have gone, people are getting ready for the Thanksgiving Day parade. Run into a bunch of Florida fans from Orlando. Apparently a couple of high schools are going to be marching, but that is on Thursday. We are here on Tuesday, and we have a lot to share with you as we get ready for the holidays. We've been waiting for a story for several months. At one point, we thought maybe the Missouri ruling from the NCAA could perhaps help Missouri get into the SEC championship game or a major bowl. Well, that train has passed, but the ruling is in, and it's about what everyone expected. The NCAA has rejected the Missouri appeal, upholding postseason bowl ban sanctions against the football program. Missouri has yet to qualify for a bowl game, although that will happen probably on Friday. Remember, the school in 2016 admitted that a tutor violated NCAA rules by completing coursework for athletes in football, baseball, and softball. In January this year, the NCAA shockingly banned Missouri football, baseball, and softball from postseason. In March, Mizzou appealed. Today, we have the ruling, and as expected, you can pretty well guess the Missouri reaction is not going to be very pleasant. We are deeply disappointed. This is coming from the chancellor and the athletic director. We are deeply disappointed and appalled by the NCAA Infractions Appeal Committee decision to shirk its responsibility and simply uphold sanctions that are not consistent with precedent or even common sense. Today's decision raises serious questions about whether the current NCAA enforcement system encourages or discourages cultures of compliance and integrity. While we have exhausted our appeal avenues, we will continue to advocate for meaningful reform within the NCAA enforcement process. The commissioner of the NCAA, who has served as the enforcement committee chairman, said throughout this process, the University of Missouri has conducted itself with great integrity and has been praised by the NCAA Division I Committee on Infractions for its exemplary cooperation in this matter. While there is no excuse for the actions of a single academic tutor and the small number of student athletes involved, the penalties applied here are unusually severe when fully considered. So certainly different reactions there. I will tell you, I've covered NCAA procedures for my entire career. I started as an investigative reporter. I do not remember a statement as punishing as the one that I just read from the chancellor and the athletic director at the University of Missouri. It is, I almost said something that would have got me in trouble. It is a bruising statement. I almost went below the belt with my description. But anyway, let's move on from there. We have a big show on tap for you today, and Pat Dooley covers the Gators. Gators are kind of that forgotten team. They're still alive as they play FSU this weekend. Seth Walder, he'll tell us about Alabama's chances and everyone else's. John Talty from AL.com wrote a brilliant piece the other day about the future of television for the SEC, especially that 3:30 window. Ross Dellinger, formerly of Baton Rouge, used to cover LSU. Now he covers college football for SI. And Lynn Bowden Jr., the all-everything Kentucky quarterback. He was once a wide receiver. Now he's just a star. Let's get to your phone calls at 855-242-7285. And we start with Dan in Louisiana. Hello, Dan.
Paul, I'm just thinking ahead, or thinking about the playoffs and the storylines that will be if Alabama gets in ahead of Georgia, and it's Clemson, Ohio State, and LSU. And I know right now that Alabama's pulling for LSU, and I also know that the only way LSU is going to rise is if Alabama falls. And I'm just thinking to myself how strange that is. I was just wondering your thoughts about it and about the storylines. Ohio State, Joe Burrow from Ohio, might play Ohio State in the championship game, and then LSU might play Alabama for
Yeah,
for a spot in the championship.
Dan, listen, I mean, I can't act like I haven't thought about it. I think Burrow versus his old school would be a really fascinating storyline. The Alabama LSU game, I haven't really focused on much yet because I still think there are a lot of moving parts, and we're talking about a game that would be about a month off. It's not that far away because this is a very late end to the regular season. It seems like the schedule is about a week later than it was a year ago. I don't know. I'm not really excited to see Alabama and LSU play again. We saw that game repeated in 2011, and it was a completely different game. And in some ways, I just don't think it's fair to LSU to have to go into Tuscaloosa, win that game, and then win the SEC championship, and then still have to play Alabama again.
Really? Well, they've been champions for a decade or right up there, and they might have to be beat twice to seal the deal.
I mean, Alabama, Nick Saban it's kind of like the old adage. Remember, our parents told us, be careful what you wish for.
Right. Well, thanks so much, Paul.
Thank you, Dan. Good to have you on. Do appreciate it. Alan is in New York. Hello, Alan. Nice of you to call.
Hey, Paul. Good to talk to you. I'm in the East Village. I think I'm actually pretty close to where you're filming.
Yeah, no, we're down in we're in the shadows of the Brooklyn Bridge, so I could probably throw a football over and hit you.
Very cool. Yeah, there's a lot of great live music and stuff around there. Welcome to the city once
Thank
again.
you.
I wanted to talk about Tua's injury. I know it's been talked about a lot, but it really hit me hard. I know you get this because you're passionate about sports, but sometimes sports is about more than sports. And my dad and I were at the national title game where Tua completed 2nd and 26, and it was one of the most magical moments I've ever seen. It was a really special thing. It almost seemed, divine watching it happen. And then to see the hero of that night in the fetal position and screaming was pretty tough. And I wanted to ask your thoughts on the morality of football when you see something like that, because, I have a libertarian side and I love sports, and I played ice hockey, and I think, people know what they're getting into, and I think that's cool, but sometimes I feel pretty squeamish about it, and that it's something kind of like smoking cigarettes where we're going to look back later and say, why did we support this? So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, Alan, I think you raised some fair points, and I have to tell you, the injury affected all of us in ways that I don't think I can quite enunciate, and I think part of it had to do with for at least the first few minutes, maybe even longer. It looked like his career was over. That was it, and I think as the story made its way to the second and third day, we realized it was not as severe as originally feared. But one thing I do know, and I know this not because I played the game, but I've been down as close to the action as you can get without having played, and I have many, many friends who did play college football and especially professional football, and the reality is it's a brutal sport, and there's no getting around it. That's what is taught, and I think that's what makes it so popular as well. I mean, remember, if you go back to ancient history, you had 50 or 100,000 people watching gladiators fight. And
they sure did.
It seems rather barbaric now, but I bet you could draw a pretty good crowd if you reenacted it. So
it's a beautiful sport.
Yeah, I mean, I try not to let it. I think unless you see it up close, you just you block it out. But I will tell you, and from where I sit, I mean, you run into a lot of players who I'm thinking of one in particular that I ran into a couple of years ago, and I'm not going to mention his name, but he was an elite player, and he was injured in a play that was similar to Tua's. He shouldn't have been in the game. The game was out of reach, and his entire career was destroyed because of that. And that is very sad to me, and I think to many other people as well.
It was so fast. That was one of the things that was shocking, and it didn't really hit me until late that night. And I thought, Tua's gone. Just like that. He's not going to put on the crimson again. It was really shocking. But thanks for taking the call. I love football. It's a part of my family tradition, and I don't think I can give it up. But I think it's
Alan. Let me say one more thing, and I don't mean this. Everybody who plays football understands the risk, and I don't mean that to paint a broad brush or a negative brush. And they're good with it. They are warriors, and they take on, and many would not change a thing. But I deeply appreciate your call, and we hope you have a great holiday. We are heading to our first break of the day. We have a lot to do here on this Tuesday afternoon, one of the great weeks of the year. The holiday season is here, and everywhere you go, people are unusually. Welcome back. We're glad you're here, and what a show we have in store for you on this Tuesday. Let's talk to Greg first up on the horn. Hello, Greg.
Hey, Paul. Thank you for taking my call.
Thank
As
you.
we're getting ready for the Iron Bowl, it made me think about the first one that was played in '89 down in Auburn, and how, when Bear Bryant was still coaching, he had told a young Pat Dye that game wasn't ever leaving as long as he had anything to do with it. And then all of the negotiations and work that Pat had to do to pull that off, when a lot of people that weren't associated with Auburn University didn't want that game to move.
No, I listen, Greg, as a moderately young reporter covering that story, I remember the day that Pat Dye announced in the mid-'80s that he was moving the game out of Legion Field, and a lot of people, especially Alabama fans who thought it was their birthright to play at Legion Field, reacted about as angrily as I've ever seen anything. By the time the game was staged in late November of 1989, it was one of the shrewdest moves that Dye ever made.
Yeah, and I remember we had just come off deployment, and we were back in Charleston, and that game was on TV, and it just felt different watching it in that stadium, because it hadn't been there in my lifetime, and so I think it was one of the things that led to Steve Sloan's resignation and why they split up the AD position from the head coach and all that.
Well, yeah, I mean, it also, I can't remember the time span when the game was agreed upon. What they did was they agreed to play, for those who don't know what we're talking about, for many, many years, for most of the existence of the modern era, the Alabama-Auburn game was played at Legion Field in Birmingham in the shadows of the University of Alabama. It was clearly an Alabama home game. There were more Alabama fans there than Auburn fans. And they made it, I can't remember the year, but they finally made an agreement to move it to Auburn. And in 1989, the game was played there. I believe the 91 game came back to Legion Field as a compromise. And then beginning in 93, it stayed in Auburn forever.
Yeah, that is actually true. And, when they made this agreement, the stadium there at Legion Field was far larger than either stadium of the universities at that time. And then by the late 70s, early 80s, they had Auburn Stadium had eclipsed the seating capacity of Legion Field, and I believe Alabama played its last ball game there in 2003.
Yeah, and for those who don't realize, Alabama played some games at Bryant-Denny Stadium, but the big games, the Tennessee game, the LSU game, and the Auburn game were like a Notre Dame game. Those games were always played at Legion Field, which had a listen. The old story goes. You may have heard this, Greg. Well, the university president at Auburn was seated in some boxes. It was Auburn's home game. They swapped every year, and the usher was wearing an Alabama, like a Roll Tide big button, and he knew then that it was time to get out of there because everybody there was connected to Alabama. Birmingham has always been an Alabama town.
Yeah, even the popcorn salesmen and ticket takers all wore Alabama gear at that stadium, and Bear Bryant had his own parking space there. And one time, Coach Dow was going up there to park, and someone told him to go park on the other side. Called him Auburn boy, and I was there for Bear Bryant's last one right before I went into the Navy, and it was a loss, but it was an electric atmosphere there at Legion Field.
No, listen, I didn't think it could ever be replicated, but Greg, I'll never forget. If you asked me the most amazing thing I've ever seen at a college football game, it wasn't something that happened during a game. It was the hour and a half before the 1989 Auburn-Alabama game, the Iron Bowl. The Auburn fans started cheering at least an hour and a half before, and I've never heard it. I mean, they never stopped until the end of the game. It was just truly remarkable. And that game, that Auburn team had lost a couple of games. It beat an undefeated Alabama team coached by Bill Curry that was ranked number 2 in the country. And that's the only way it could have ever been, winning that first game down there. Appreciate the call very much. Rory is in Pennsylvania. Rory, you're on the air. Go right ahead.
Hey, Paul.
Hi there.
Thanks for taking my call.
You got
How
it.
you feeling? You feeling better?
Yeah, I am. I appreciate you asking. Thank you so much.
Good. Got to have your wife write you in an antibiotic.
Yeah,
Sorry, Paul. I was just calling to talk to you about Alabama and your ranking of Georgia above Alabama, and I was watching Stephen A. today, and they were all basically writing Alabama off. And I was just curious to know, after that, you got to go with common factors of the teams that all these teams play because they don't play enough games. So the sample size is small. And obviously the common team is Texas A&M. So seeing as Alabama played Texas A&M and Georgia played Texas A&M and Georgia won that game, but it was a questionable call at the end on that hold that may have given A&M a chance to pull that out. Just curious to know what your thought is on that and just why you had Georgia ranked up above Alabama.
You know something? I was actually talking to Stephen A. on his radio show about 30 minutes ago about the very same topic. And I think it's a healthy debate whether Alabama should be ranked ahead of Georgia. Now, I didn't do it, but I could. And part of the reason I didn't do it is I just don't think it matters right now. Georgia is one of these teams that it's either going to win and be in or it's going to lose and be out. It's irrelevant. But your point is good. I mean, the Texas A&M and South Carolina games would favor Alabama in both cases. But I'm really anxious to hear what Rob Mullen says tonight. If that question is asked, did you consider putting Alabama over Georgia? I think it's a fair question. Thank you for the call. Great to have you on. John is in Baton Rouge, and you are on the air. Hello, John.
Hey, Paul. I talked to you right before the Alabama-LSU game. You might remember I was bringing up about how weak LSU's defense has been. And,
right.
I don't know. I just for so long, their offense was just terrible, and the defense was just so good. And what I can't understand, Dave Aranda, he's been just great at LSU, and but whose defensive coordinator is going to, with less than 2 minutes to go in the game, and Alabama's got the ball on their own 15-yard line with less than 2 minutes to go, and who is going to let their defensive backs let a receiver run around them to catch a 85-yard touchdown pass? I mean, I'd have told them to tackle the receivers before they ran around me. It's only a 15-yard penalty. And another thing,
listen, I want to say that, John, I am going to withhold judgment until this year is over because I do think Aranda is dealing with something he's never had to deal with before, and that's an offense that scores before you can blink an eye.
Yeah.
That's not really an excuse, but I do think he's dealing with a different factor than he's ever had to deal with before.
Yeah, they score so quickly that the defense doesn't have time to rest. I realize that. But we're not getting any pressure on the quarterbacks. We seldom ever blitz. Caleb Von Chason, defensive end, he'll come in there and maybe get a hand on the quarterback, but he's completely out of control, and he hardly ever makes the tackle for a sack. But he does get a hand on him. And then, of course, Michael Divinity, he was pretty good at rushing quarterback, and he left the team. I still don't know why. Nobody's really said anything. And
Yeah,
Just
listen,
do the
I
thing
think,
right.
John, I think there's some extenuating circumstances, and I was talking to somebody the other day, and this will be proven out one way or the other, but sometimes players, they get late in the year and they start trailing off. They start thinking about other things. Divinity, I think there is a very specific reason why he departed at the time he did. Listen, thanks for the call. We're up against the break. Pat Dooley covers the Gators. We'll talk about the SEC's forgotten.
Ready to go. Rivalry games, fun to be a part of. Exciting week. Obviously, a slightly different schedule this week. One, you're coming off a bye week. Two, there's no school. After Tuesday, no school Wednesday, Thursday. We'll just try to make sure. I've always done this to make sure our guys have the opportunity to go spend some family time at Thanksgiving. So we'll practice early Thursday and wrap things up early, so guys can get home if they want to. For Thanksgiving. Overall, I think we're pretty healthy. We had a lot of sick guys last week. Nobody injured, but a lot of sick guys, a lot of puking and other stuff that happens when you're sick. So had some guys miss a little bit of practice last week, but overall pretty healthy from guys that have been out. Expect Bernie's got a chance to come and play this week. They said he's way ahead of schedule, so he'll be able to do some stuff today. So that would be a positive to get Amari Bernie back for the game. Zuniga's been cleared to go, so he should be practicing good to go today. To have him back for the game, and everybody else should be pretty healthy. Unless I'm missing somebody that you guys want to know about, you can let me know.
As a play caller, how challenging is it when you don't have a consistent conventional running game?
It's pretty easy. Just call other plays. You guys hear me? There's so many plays and so little time. We're still probably, I think, we have a whole list of every play that's been in all the game plans this year. And we could go, if I just called plays that we had in game plans and haven't run this year, could probably get through 2 to 3 games with those plays. So it's pretty easy. I do love to win. I've never thought of it that way, to be honest with you. I'm focused on winning this game. And I'm focused on winning this game because it is a rivalry game. Last game of the regular season, I want to get a win, and because I want to have that great taste in my mouth. There's a lot you want to win. You want to send the seniors out the right way. You want to finish with 10 wins in the regular season. You want to get to a great bowl game. You want to be undefeated in the swamp. All of those to me motivate you. Most of all, that motivates you, if anybody, I would say that most, that when we show up here on Saturday, they're going to light up the scoreboard and they're going to keep score. All those other things are awesome, but I don't need. As a competitor, that's all the motivation you need. That they're just going to keep scoring the game. I don't need anything even beyond that. It's certainly the taste in your mouth effect is huge of winning this game. You want to finish off the year with a win.
Welcome back as we continue here. It is Tuesday afternoon, and how about them Gators? They play FSU. There was a time when this was arguably the premier game of the year in college football, but things have changed on both sides. Can you believe that Gators have not defeated FSU at home since 2009? They have been destroyed by FSU. That is unlikely to happen this week. It is the 7:30 game on the SEC Network. Pat Dooley joining us, our good friend from down in Gainesville. Pat, I don't know where to start because, most of the problems with this game lately has been on the Gators side, but the Seminoles have taken over the lackluster part of the series. Good afternoon, and what's this game mean this year?
Well, it means a lot for a lot of reasons. I think more to Florida than Florida State because, Florida State's probably going to get a new coach next week. They're going to start over. But for Florida, it means getting to 10 wins, which was one more win you had the regular season last year. And it means you're showing progress, and it also means you're going to get to a nicer bowl. But it also allows you – let's face it, Paul, well, you saw the Miami game Saturday. And Miami and FSU are both in the toilet right now. Why not keep your foot on their throat, and win this game, win the state championship, and say, hey, there's only one team that's recruiting-wise, there's only one team that's been in New Year's Six bowls. The other ones are hoping to get to Shreveport or whatever. So that makes it a huge game for Florida and for these seniors as well.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, it just seemed not much has gone right in that state. I'm interested, Pat, beyond this game, because I think we all know what's going to happen. Just your thoughts on the Gator season, because I mean, all these college football playoff conversations, and I tried to explain to somebody up here today, I think it was Stephen A. Smith. I said, hey, I was talking about Auburn and saying this is really a good team. I mean, they lost at Florida. He looked at me like okay, what does that mean? And I explained Florida's resume, and it just doesn't seem like anyone wants to listen that the Gators probably, with somebody else's schedule, would be in great shape right now.
First of all, why were you discussing college football with Stephen A. Smith? Okay,
that's a good question.
That's the A part of that. The B part of it is, it has been a nice season. It has been a fun season in a lot of ways. But again, when you lose to Georgia and don't win the East, it's not a great season. On the other hand, when Jim McElwain won the East, it wasn't a great season because they always lost to FSU at the end of the year and then got, boat raced by Alabama. So, I think this has been a really nice another step. And I want to say a baby step. Last year was a big stride in getting things where they wanted to get them, and now they've taken another nice step. They need to finish it off by beating FSU to get to 10 wins. But look who they've lost to. They lost to LSU and Georgia, who are 1-4, and I assume will be 1-4 tonight in the college football playoff. So, and the other thing is going back, to what you were talking about. They haven't won since 2009. I made this point to some of the writers yesterday who I knew were writing a story, and I don't blame them. It's a sexy story in this part of the woods. But the guys who are true seniors on this team who've been here for 4 years, they've only played them at home once, and that was with an interim coach. So I don't think they're to be held responsible for what Florida's done over the last 10 years.
No, really good point. Pat Dooley joining us. Pat, I want to talk about the East and forgetting this season, but in looking ahead, in terms of the window opening, obviously the competition's always with Georgia. Here comes Tennessee. Let me start with Georgia. What's the Florida view of the Dogs right now?
I think Florida fans felt like after that game, Georgia wasn't that much better than Florida, but they were better. They were a little better, and they were better where it mattered in the line of scrimmage. And I think they felt like they're making progress, but they're not there yet. They haven't caught them. Forget the 5 stars or 4 stars, all that stuff, but they need to beat Georgia. It's important for Florida right now. I felt like last year the most important game was the Florida State game because they had won in I think 5 or 6 years. But this year, now there's no question that Georgia's the most important game. They've got to figure out a way to beat those guys, and they came closer than they did last year. But you can't allow 12 first downs, third down conversions against a team like that. And I don't think Georgia's obviously their defense is ridiculous what they've been able to do, but I don't think they're a dominant team, and you saw that Saturday against Texas A&M. But the other thing, here's what you're going to have. And, Paul, I know you're ready for Atlanta for July SEC Media Days. You have thought about that.
I didn't realize that.
Right? But here's what you're going to get there. Tennessee is going to be the new Missouri. Like Missouri last year, everybody's like, I don't know, Missouri might win that division. Missouri's going to go. Yeah, well done. 5-6, and now obviously they got bad news today, so they're not going to be bowl eligible. Even after being
now, Pat Dooley, are you not buying the resurgence of Tennessee football? I mean, come on.
Well, look, I used to call them the Kardashians, right? Because they looked good, but they never did anything. Then I started calling them Uncle Rico. Like Uncle Rico because they always want to go back to the past. They're always out in the field throwing the ball again, for the camera. But they weren't good. I give him credit for what he's done, Jeremy Pruitt. He's done a really good job in the back half of the season. But who they beaten? That's what I look at. They have still not beaten really any good teams. And next year they play Oklahoma in week 2. And obviously they get Florida early, and then they got Georgia in the back end of their schedule where it's usually soft. So it'll be interesting. I don't begrudge what he's done. I think he's probably done as good a coaching job as anybody's done there in a while in terms of winning games that you're supposed to win. Now, the problem for him is he didn't win the games he was supposed to win early. He lost to Georgia State and lost to a bad BYU team. So he's got to figure that part of it out, too.
Well, Pat, I know I'm surprised you have not been called by the University of Tennessee to be honored with some award with all the kind words that you have said. But I've quoted you countless times on the Kardashians. Yeah, they did beat. They did find Derek Dooley beatable. Well, listen, I guess I will not recommend you for the commencement speaker this year at the University of Tennessee.
That's okay. I'll be all right.
You would be a good one, though.
But look, Paul, this is a instant gratification society, and if you're not good for a long time, I mean, people are going to get down on you really hard, and that's what we're dealing with down here, where Florida was, and Florida was in a terrible pit. There's no question about it. Now, Miami and FSU are in that pit, and we'll see what FSU does to dig out of it next week.
Great to have you on, Pat. Always enjoyable. Thank you very much. We will talk to you soon.
All right, buddy. See you later.
Pat Dooley, who once called Tennessee football the Kardashians, and seems like he's doubled down on them. I think he'll be a quote machine for Knoxville Sports Radio in the morning. We'll take a break. More of your phone calls at 855-242-7285.
Clemson week, kickoff here at noon, Williams-Brice Stadium. Obviously honored to be a part of one of the great rivalries in college football. Very important to our state and important to the University of South Carolina. And we had a good practice this morning. Guys bouncing around. They feel that vibe during this week, and we're looking forward to it. They got a good football team led on offense by Trevor Lawrence. He's completing right at 70% of his passes. A guy that can obviously hurt you with his legs. He's a really good athlete. They use some of the zone read and some of the designed quarterback runs, but elite arm talent, can make all the throws. Just really impressed watching him, and a really competitive guy when you turn the tape on. Injury-wise going in the game, Brian Edwards is questionable. He did a little bit today. He had a scope last week, so we'll see how he continues to progress. Obviously, he's a guy that's not going to need a lot of snaps, and that such, but we'll see how that continues to progress. Kobe Smith still got a little bit of an ankle from the A&M game. Didn't do a lot today. We're going to see what he can do tomorrow, and other than that, we should be good to go for the game, and I'll open up for any questions. Very similar to Auburn, Alabama. In that state, there's no pro teams. You're either South Carolina or Clemson in this state for the most part, and very similar to that state, and it means a lot.
I think you mentioned on your call-in show last week you were toying with maybe a new offensive line group out there. Have you settled on the starting five that you're going to put out there this week?
Colin, not as right at this time, but Ja'Kai Moore is a guy that we've been really impressed with at right tackle, and moving Dylan to left tackle, and then Sedarius to left guard. But still, having Jordan Rhodes at left guard, Sedarius at left tackle, and Dylan at right tackle as well. So we'll go with one of those groups and probably play both of those combinations in the game. Mm-hmm.
Well, this is by far Clemson's greatest stretch of football in their history. Mm-hmm. What's it like to have to be the head coach of the rival when your tenure exactly coincides with that?
I worry and spend a lot of time on South Carolina, Gene, and at the end of the day, I can't control, and I always talk to our players about control the things you can control. And as far as recruiting, as far as developing players on campus, coaching, those things I can control here, and I can't control the other. Obviously, we need to do a better job as coaches and players in this game than we have in the previous three, and find a way to win the game.
Couple of questions for you. During this open week, did you have a chance to sit down with Jake Bentley and talk about any future plans with him?
No, we won't do it after the Clemson game.
Welcome back. We are glad you're here on what's been a pretty active day so far. Glad to have all of you on board. More phone calls at 855-242-7285. 285. Danny is up next. Hello, Danny. You're on the air.
Yes, sir, Mr. Paul. Let me start out by saying I love your show.
Thank you.
And yes, sir. And the reason I think Nick Saban is saying that's going to be the toughest game they play this year is because 2 or 3 reasons. You know, they're going to Auburn in a hostile environment without the starting quarterback and with a pretty good defense, and it's hard to win in Auburn.
Well, listen, I mean, the line that Saban said that upset everyone or upset some people was that he said this is probably the best team we've played this year. I don't think, listen, you don't have to explain to Nick Saban who LSU is. He said that because he is trying to turn the page and he's trying to butter up his opponent. He's trying to make this game into an end-all, be-all. It is the most difficult road game they've had. Of course, that's not saying very much considering the road games have been at Mississippi State, South Carolina, and Texas A&M. But you know, he said that purposely. He was reading from a statement there. Nick Saban never says anything he has not thought through.
Oh, yes, sir. And like you said, you know, he was just trying to get a message out to his players and everybody too. And it's going to be a tough game.
Yeah, listen, I mean, I've sat here. I've been in New York all morning since the wee hours listening to pundits overreact to what Nick Saban said, including, can't remember who it was, maybe it was Marcus Spears, somebody else saying, I don't know why Nick Saban is lying. Nick Saban is not lying. Nick Saban is just having some fun. You see it every day in politics. I mean, well, in politics there's a lot more lying going on. Mike is up next in Macon, Georgia. Hey, Mike.
Thanks, Paul. I probably am going on, I hope, but thank you for taking my call. Paul,
Thank you.
After for us dog fans, we've enjoyed the very tactful commentary the last 2 ball games from Mr. Gary Danielson, and I've enjoyed that. And I think we're all really excited about Dan Orlovsky, coming on to call our game on Saturday against Georgia Tech. I heard him in that segment with you a few weeks ago saying that Georgia was done. And L didn't seem to take to it too well, and you stayed pretty neutral. But I know he's like one of y'all's budding young
Yeah, Mike.
stars.
By the way, when he said that, we have, for those who don't know the backstory on what we do up here, the show comes on at 8. We have a meeting at 6. I don't know why it's so early, but I'll leave that to somebody else. And we were going around the table after the South Carolina game, and Greenberg said, Dan, you did the game. What's your opinion on Georgia? He said, Georgia is done. They're dead. And he came to me, and I said, I don't really buy that. I watched this before, and I think they'll come back. And Orlovsky about came out of his chair, and I saw him today. I said, what game do you got this weekend? He goes, going to Atlanta. I said, he's going to, and I said, well, you're going to be well received, Dan. And listen, that's an opinion. We live in a hot take universe, Mike, and I'm as guilty of it as the next person. I have buried and given Jim Harbaugh last rites about 10 times, and I'll do it again Saturday if they lose.
Well, I'm not knocking Dan. I mean, he's actually a pleasurable guy to listen to. I mean, when he made those comments, I actually went on and researched his career, and I saw that his most famous moment as a quarterback was the first time he ever started, and he wasn't chased out of the end zone for a safety, but just inadvertently ran out of the end zone for a safety, which pretty much finished his chances as being a starter. And so,
listen, I give him credit.
He ought to be an expert on it.
I got in trouble last year. I was on Get Up with Greenberg, and Orlovsky the day before had said that Tua is going to be the LeBron of college football. And I said, I think that's a bit ridiculous. And besides, until yesterday, I'd never heard of Dan Orlovsky, and I don't even know how to pronounce his name. And and the truth of the matter is, I didn't know who he was. And just to show you the way ESPN can work sometimes, one of the producers, texted me and said, "Why would you do that?" I said, "Well, I was just being funny." He said, "You need to call Dan and apologize." So listen, I didn't. So I called Orlovsky. I had never met him before, never talked to him, and he just started laughing. I said, "Dan, I just don't want you to." I mean, nothing. He said, "No, listen, it was hilarious, and we have become good friends ever since."
Well, I've got nothing against him, Paul. I just
he's one of the best analysts I've ever heard at breaking things down in a way where it is simplistic and there's always a hot take in every statement, which means one thing: he spends all night working on it.
Well, he's good at it. I mean, I'll give him that, and I'm going to enjoy listening to him, do the commentary. Paul, if you have time, can I just say one thing about I heard on your previous guest, Mr. Dooley from Florida, talking about next year, and this year is almost done. Can I say one thing about next year?
Yes.
I was looking at Texas A&M's schedule for next year. As bad as that schedule has been this year, I was looking at their schedule next year, and they should be 6-0 when they face Auburn in mid.
Oh yeah, they have a great schedule
of next year. If they win that game, and Danny Sheridan assures us that Auburn will be mediocre next year, they should be 10-0 when they go into the last two games of the season next year. So there ought to be a lot of optimism, I think.
It needs to be because they have a bunch of cream puffs on their non-conference schedule. No more Clemson, so Jimbo has a chance to earn his $75 million. We'll tell you who's going to be in the playoff in a moment with Seth